According to one commentator on the book of Hebrews, Hebrews has more to say about our words than anything else it addresses in our lives, more than money, more than sex, more than family. So, what does that tell us? I believe it tells us that our words matter. Our words matter. And we don't have the time this morning to look at all of the verses in the book of Proverbs that talk about our words, our speech, but here's just a sampling of a few of the verses, and we'll get to some others later, but here's just a few as we start that talk about our words. Chapter 10, verse 19. When words are many, transgression is not lacking, but whoever restrains his tongue or his lips is prudent or wise. Chapter 11, verse 13. Whoever goes about slandering reveals secrets, but he who is trustworthy in spirit keeps a thing covered. Chapter 13, verse 3. Whoever guards his mouth preserves his life. He who opens wide his lips comes to ruin. So one of the things we hear over and over again in the book of Proverbs is the more we talk, the more words we say, the more likely it is for us to get into trouble, to offend someone, to say something we shouldn't, to say something foolish. Whoever guards his mouth preserves his life, and he who opens wide his lips comes to ruin. Chapter 15, verse 1, a soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. Chapter 15, verse 28, the heart of the righteous ponders how to answer, but the mouth of the wicked pours out evil things. Chapter 17, verse 28, even a fool who keeps silent is considered wise. When he closes his lips, he is deemed intelligent. And chapter 21, verse 23, whoever keeps his mouth and his tongue keeps himself out of trouble. So our words matter. Jesus said, Matthew chapter 12, I tell you, on the day of judgment, people will give account for every careless word they speak. For by your words you will be justified, and by your words you will be condemned. What he's saying is that the words that we speak reflect what is in our hearts. And he went on to say, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. So this morning, as we consider what the Word of God has to say, especially the Word of God in Proverbs has to say about our words, let's not just think about that other person who comes to mind in our lives, maybe even in our church, who often speaks foolish words. Let's think about ourselves. Let's not apply this to someone else. Let's apply it to ourselves, because as James writes, none of us are able to control or tame the tongue. None of us have mastered the tongue. We all, from time to time, even the best of us, speak foolish or careless words. We speak in anger and frustration. We say words that are boastful, thinking about what John said last week about pride and humility. And so let's not apply this to someone else who's here or who isn't here, other than applying it to ourselves. So, the book of Proverbs has lots to say about our words. But I'd like to focus on just two verses in Proverbs, though, as I said, we'll look at some others, but the focus is on chapter 18, verses 20 and 21. If you were paying careful attention to the verses that Patrick read, several in verses 1 through 21 in that passage had to do with our speech. But let's look just at verses 20 and 21. From the fruit of a man's mouth, his stomach is satisfied. He is satisfied by the yield of his lips. Death and life are in the power of the tongue, and those who love it will eat its fruits. So those two verses, especially verse 21, emphasize that our words are powerful. Death and life are in the power of the tongue. So our words have the power of life and death. So what should we do? We should think. We should ponder before we speak. Let's consider how our words are powerful, how they have the power of life and death. I want to share with you two ways in which our words are powerful. Number one, our words have the power to help or hurt others. As kids, we said, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never harm me. But we know now that words can and do harm us. Proverbs 12:18 says, there is one whose rash words are like sword thrusts, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. So again, the thought of life and death, sword thrusts or healing. We know that emotional wounds often can take longer to heal than physical wounds. So death and life are in the power of the tongue. Our words have the power to help or hurt others. We could consider the sin of gossip. It's mentioned in chapter 18, verse 8. I'm not sure if you caught that or not, but it says, the words of a whisperer, the words of a gossip are like delicious morsels. They go down into the inner parts of the body. And so, for some reason, we love gossip. It's like a delicious morsel. And I'm not a psychologist, but I know sometimes we like gossip because if we hear and spread bad things about other people, it makes us feel better about our own life. You know, you might think they have a perfect marriage, but did you know? And it makes us feel better about ourselves or our marriage or whatever the gossip has to do with. And so the proverb here is that the words of a gossip are like delicious morsels. Naturally, we like this. We like this. We might think of gossip as just a little sin, but it can destroy a relationship. It can even destroy a church. And so the tongue, in it is the power of life and death. James, I mentioned him already. It's often called the wisdom book of the New Testament, chapter 3, verses 5 and 6. He writes, the tongue is a small member, meaning it's a small part of the body. Yet it boasts great things. How great a fire is set ablaze by such a small fire. And the tongue is a fire, a world of unrighteousness. So we know that a huge forest fire can be started by just a little campfire. And the tongue, with just a few words, can do great damage, just like a forest fire. Just one sentence, just a few words can do great damage. But it's also true that just a few words can do great good. Death and life are in the power of the tongue. Maybe you can recall, maybe we're quick to recall the bad things that people have said to us or that we've heard them say that have hurt us. But maybe we can also remember something good that has been said, maybe to us personally, that has encouraged us, that has given us inner strength. And so it's true. Just a few words can do great damage, but also great good. Paul the apostle in Ephesians 4:29 says, let no corrupting talk come out of your mouths, but only such as is good for building up, as fits the occasion, that it may give grace to those who hear. And so talk can be corrupting, but it can also be something that builds another person up. It can give grace to those who hear. So before we speak, we should ask ourselves 3 questions. First of all, is this the right thing to say? Is this corrupting talk? Or is this good for building up, for encouraging and strengthening others? Proverbs 16:24 says, gracious words are like a honeycomb, sweetness to the soul and health to the body. Proverbs 12:25 says, anxiety in a man's heart weighs him down, but a good word makes him glad. So, is this the right thing to say? Or is this just a foolish thing to say? Is it a hurtful thing to say? I don't think that all of our words need to be so impactful. You know, sometimes we can talk about the weather and talk about sports and talk like that, but or whatever your favorite topic is. But and there are times for that, and sometimes that is the right thing to say. But you know, is this the right thing to say? Thinking more about, you know, things that, you know, have the potential to hurt someone, offend someone. Is it the right thing to say? Is this corrupting talk, or will it build someone up? The second question is this the right time to say it? Paul talks about speech that fits the occasion. Proverbs 25:11 says, to make an apt answer is a joy to a man, and a word in season, how good it is. But Proverbs 27:14 says, whoever blesses his neighbor with a loud voice, rising early in the morning, will be counted as cursing. So sometimes you can have good intentions and you can say something that maybe you think is good, but it's not the right time. You know, Marcia's birthday's coming up in a few days, and if we gathered as a family together while she was sleeping at 6 in the morning, we all shouted, happy birthday, those are nice words to say, but that's not the right time for us to say them. That would not be heard as a good thing, but as the proverb here says, as cursing. So does it fit the occasion? Sometimes we need to realize that, you know, people might want some space. They might not want to talk right now. It might not be the right time for that question. It might not be the right time for that rebuke. You know, think to yourself, is this the right time to say it? And then thirdly, is this the right way to say it? Is this the right way to say it? You know, maybe it's necessary to rebuke someone for maybe the sin of gossip, but make sure you say it, that rebuke, in the right way, that you do it in love, that you do it in kindness. Say it in the right way. You know, and as we think about, you know, how our words have the power to help or hurt others, you know, we probably can think maybe of a recent thing, or maybe it was a long time ago, but of someone who hurt us by what they said. And how I think that it would be best for us to handle those types of situations is do one of two things. If it is significant enough that you think that this should be addressed, that it was a hurtful thing, it was an inappropriate thing, it should not be left unaddressed, then you need to go to that person kindly, in love, and tell them that maybe that was a foolish thing to say. That was, whether it hurt you or someone else, that was not something I believe you should have said. And hopefully they'll take that gentle rebuke and they will see or look from your perspective, and you can talk that over, and maybe they will ask for forgiveness. But you can, if it's significant enough, go to that person, and I know it's not what we like to do, but if it's significant enough, you should go to that person, because often when something is said carelessly or foolishly, that person never gives it another thought. And you're left stewing, being bitter about it every day while they have totally forgotten that word or that conversation. And so if it's significant enough, if it's something you think needs to be addressed, then you should go to that person. But if you say, well, that was a foolish thing, that was a careless thing, that did hurt me, but I know that I sometimes say foolish things, we all do, and I'm just going to let that slide for now. So, we can't be rebuking people all the time, because we're all saying careless, foolish things. So we need to have some sort of understanding in that way. But if it is significant enough, we should go to that person, because maybe they don't realize, what they said or how they said it or in what way that might offend or hurt. But at other times, we just need to chalk that up to foolishness, rashness, and realizing that we all, from time to time, say things we regret. So our words have the power to help or hurt others. Second one, we don't have as much time for, but the second one is our words have the power to help or hurt ourselves. This is one we might not think of as much. But there is an agricultural metaphor in Proverbs 18, 20 and 21. Notice that the word fruit is in both verses. From the fruit of a man's mouth, his stomach is satisfied. He is satisfied by the yield of the harvest of his lips. Death and life are in the power of the tongue, and those who love it will eat its fruits. So an agricultural metaphor. The words fruit and yield. It's kind of maybe a strange image to think about, but the image is of what we say is like a harvest coming out of our mouths, and we eat that fruit. Now, in the ESV, I didn't compare all of the translations, but the word used here is satisfied. From the fruit of a man's mouth, his stomach is satisfied. But I do know that the original Hebrew word translated as satisfied really has to do with our stomachs being filled, which sometimes can be a good thing, and satisfied, I think, has a positive implication or meaning, but it's more of our stomachs being filled. And sometimes if we fill our stomachs with bad things, that can be a bad result. So the harvest can be a good thing, or it can be a bad thing. And we sort of have that expression, eating your words, in particular situations when we maybe make a big declaration that something will or will not happen, and later on we're wrong and we have to eat our words. Sort of similar, but the proverb here is about what we speak. It will have consequences, not just for others, but also for ourselves. In a sense, we will reap what we sow. There will be consequences for us by what we say. Sometimes good, sometimes bad. In the New Living Translation, the second line of verse 21 says, "Those who love to talk will reap the consequences." Now, in Proverbs, there's a bias as you might notice, towards being more quiet than being more talkative, which I kind of like because I am more of a quiet person. But at the same time, we need to realize that there is a time to be quiet, but there's also a time to talk. So we need to be careful, though, in loving to talk or loving to hear the sound of our own voices. And loving to talk, being too talkative, being rash with our words, saying foolish things gets us into trouble. And so there can be consequences for us. We can be helped or hurt by our own words. You know, our reputation can be damaged by our words. You know, we can do lots of great things. We can serve in the church. We can help others, but if we have no control of what we say and we're constantly saying inappropriate things, saying things at the wrong time, saying foolish things or hurtful things, then that undoes a lot of the good things that we can do. So our reputation can be hurt by our words. Our witness can be hurt by our words. Again, we might be striving to obey what God's word says, striving to be a good Christian, striving to share the gospel. But if in our words we are saying things that we shouldn't say, if we are offending people needlessly, foolishly, if we have no control of our tongues, then all of the good things, again, are really tainted by careless words. So we need to be very careful. It's not just that our words can help or hurt others. It's also that our words can help or hurt ourselves. How many times have you said to yourself, I shouldn't have said that? And how many times have you said to yourself, I should have said something? Our words have the power of life and death, so think before you speak. Let me end with this, the example of Jesus in 1 Peter 2:21 through 23. Apostle Peter writes, Christ suffered for you, leaving you an example, so that you might follow in his steps. He committed no sin, neither was deceit found in his mouth. When he was reviled, he did not revile in return. When he suffered, he did not threaten, but continued entrusting himself to him who judges justly. So Jesus has given us an example so that we might follow in his steps. He really is the embodiment of wisdom. If we want to know how to live skillfully in this world, how to do life well, then we look at Jesus, the embodiment of wisdom. He always knew when to speak and when not to speak. And thinking about what Peter writes here, do you think it was easy for Jesus to remain silent while suffering on the cross and being mocked by his enemies? No, it wasn't easy. I'm imagining that it was incredibly difficult to remain silent. But he remained silent because there was something in this situation more important than defending himself, and that was that he was dying for our salvation. And people were amazed by the way that Jesus talked, the words coming out of his mouth. They were amazed by the way that he talked. Are we, his followers, known for being like him in the way that we talk? Or are we known for talking foolishly, carelessly, constantly having to apologize for saying the wrong thing, or maybe the right thing at the wrong time? Our words are not minor things. Jesus said we would have to give an account for the careless words that we speak. Our speech is not a minor thing. A lot of good can be done by our words, but a lot of harm can also be done by our words. And so may we follow the example of Jesus. May we look at what the book of Proverbs has to say about speaking wisely, or sometimes being quiet, because that's the wise thing to do. Our words have the power of life and death, so think before you speak.